Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate it.
So let's start with what is it most that you find appalling about the president's change in policy?
Well, I understand, of course, the sentiment that you've tried something for 50-something years, it hasn't worked, we'll try something new. The problem is that what you put in its place is something that is all one-sided. We're giving this to Cuba, we're going to allow this, we're going to allow that. What concessions has Raul Castro had to make? And it's not for scoring points, it's that all of us, by this approach or the other approach, what you want to get at is a free Cuba, a Cuba where people can express their opinions, where you have political parties, where you have elections, freedom, that space for democracy to exist. And I don't think that you get that with all of those concessions going to the dictatorship. More money, more infusion, you can use your credit card, yippee, that's wonderful. But what concession has Raul had to make? Zippo. He has released 50-something dissidents who should have never been in jail in the first place. And I'm glad that Alan Gross is free. Hallelujah that he was able to spend Hanukkah with his family. It's interesting that at the lawyer's office or wherever he was out signing some papers, I hope that your viewers saw that there's a framed photo of Che Guevara on the wall. I'm kind of suspicious about that. But even though Alan Gross is able to be free, the brothers to the shoot-down families who lost their 4 loved ones, they spent another Christmas without their loved ones. And we traded one of their killers for this so-called Cuban James Bond.
Okay, so you say so-called. So you do not believe that this intelligence asset is a hero?
I don't want to call someone a hero, a saint, or whatever. What I'm saying is that the administration is now exaggerating, in my mind, the role that this agent played in order to say, look, we didn't swap Alan Gross, a totally innocent man's life.
So you think the president is lying when he says that Rolando Seraf helped lead not just to the WASP network, but also catch 2 other spies that were in the United States operating?
I don't know about the WASP network. I do know about the Ana Belén Montes case,
correct,
which is a very talked about case. And I know the folks who were intimately involved in our government in catching this spy. And in fact, we've had some of the folks down here that did press conferences with. None of them had mentioned this unnamed source. But look, we have had many sources. We have had many sources, Jim, who have given us information that has proven to be valuable. But I think that the reason that they're creating this blowing him up a little bit is puffing him up is because so many times Secretary Kerry came before our committee in Foreign Affairs and said, we will not trade these 3 convicted spies for anyone because there's no moral equivalency. In order to get around that, now what the administration is saying, we didn't trade him for Alan Gross. We just got this high-value intelligence agent. I'm glad that he's here.
Let me ask you.
It's wonderful.
Let's move on to
let's not puff up his role.
Let's move on to some of the specifics. Do you believe that the increase in remittances from $2,000 a year to $8,000 a year that Cuban Americans are able to send to their loved ones, will it not make their lives better on the island?
Well, I certainly hope so, because it's going to happen.
Do you have any doubt?
Of course I do. First of all, remember that what happens is that the money goes from the ones who have it here in the United States, and it's not all the Cuban people, those who are lucky enough, fortunate enough, blessed to have relatives in the United States, they're able to send their hard-earned dollars to Cuba. What happens when it gets there? You still have this slave economy, Jim. You have the owners of all the properties, the owners of all the businesses. It still remains the Cuban military. You haven't changed the folks who are leading the charge in Cuba.
But the individuals receiving this money will be able to spend it, make their lives better, be able to spend it in ways that will make other people's lives better in Cuba, correct?
To a point, but let me make this point. Right now, if you felt so badly about the poverty in Cuba, you could put a whole dumpster outside Channel 4 studios, fill it with food and medicine dollars, and send it all to Cuba. There are no restrictions. You can send food, you can send medicine. but the people of Cuba lack food and medicine. Is it because the United States is not helping? You can up the amount. We can send everything we want. It never gets to the Cuban people as the way they should. And once it gets to that particular family, their lives are a little bit better, and they'll use that to hustle. But you haven't changed the infrastructure. You haven't changed the underpinnings of a corrupt regime. You haven't made them any freer, and you haven't brought them any closer to democracy.
If this is such a bad deal for the Cuban people, why are we hearing such joy coming out of so many folks from Havana that they're happy with this deal?
I'm not saying that it's a bad deal. I hope that all of these changes produce the desired result for those Cuban families. But I think that what the president has been saying all along is that he hopes that it also has changes for the government, for the structure of freedom and democracy. The president apologized to Raul Castro in his phone conversation for talking for 15 minutes, and so they joked about that. And then Raul Castro then gave him a lecture of about half an hour on the phone. That's a historic phone call. And why did he talk from one leader to a corrupt leader, Raul Castro? Why? Not because they were talking about how it's going to benefit Ana Gomez or Juan Lopez. It's because he's hoping that there's going to be some change in the government. And I don't see how increasing remittances, increasing dollars, increasing hotel visits, how any of that is going to produce the kind of changes that I think the president would want, which is freedom, democracy, and human rights.
Well, if what we've been doing for 53 years hasn't brought about those changes, perhaps this can. And that's my question. Why not give the president some room here? Why come out immediately and reject what the president has done so vociferously, as you have, as Marco Rubio has, as Mary Diaz-Balart? Why not give the president a little bit of time to see if this brings about some of the changes you would like?
Because what he has negotiated, well, he hasn't negotiated, what he has offered to Raul Castro is, here's a lot of money that you control the economy, you control the hotels, you control the land, you control the property. Here's a lot of money, and what do you have to do? Oh, you don't have to do anything.
Let's see what he does. Let's see what they do in response.
But we have seen what Raul does in response.
Let's see in the future. Let's see going forward what he does in response.
Well, I don't think that that's the kind of foreign policy we should have with Cuba. Let's give him $1 million and let's see what happens. This is what I think should have happened. When we say we've tried this for 50-something years, Jim, I don't believe that we really have tried it. Look, if you're not going to Cuba now, traveling to Cuba, you're not thinking very hard about how to get to Cuba, because do you go to church? Then you're a church worker. Do you write a blog that only your sister reads? Then you're a journalist. Do you care about human rights? Then you're human rights activists, all allowed to travel to Cuba. To say that there's been an embargo in place is really, look, we have over 190 countries. The only one that has had some limitations, and they're weak, but some limitations, is the United States. I say to those 190 countries, hey, you've been engaging Castro for 50 years. Why don't you try something new?
But you know that's not going to happen.
But we can make that same argument, just like you say, well, we're the ones that have to change. But I think the president could have had a very stronger pro-human rights, pro-democracy campaign in trying to work with our allies, seeing what we can do. Look, what I fear is that he's got a checklist of countries and deals that he's willing to make. Cuba, check. Iran is next, check. Israel, check. You know that he's coming for the Israelis. You know that he's going to tell them to deal with Palestinians.
Let's stay with Cuba. Let's take a break here.